It's the morning of January 30th, 2026. My last long walk through Tirana before I leave for Corche tomorrow. The city feels different when you know you're about to leave it. Not dramatic, just clarified. And a little sad. Do you feel sad when you leave a place? Not because it was perfect, but because something in you changed there. Maybe it's just something after familiarity, going into or back to an unknown, whatever comes next. Or maybe it's the triumph of that familiarity, not that you've mastered a place, but you made it home, no matter how short or long that was for. In my case, it's more contemplative. Was I my best self here? Did I get out of the experience what I wanted to? And was it worth it? I could have been more outgoing, and I take that knowledge with me to Corte. People are still moving through their routines here, unaware of my absence, as most were of my arrival. Coffee, conversation, work, life continuing the way it always does, even when something underneath it has started to shift. It's a feeling I've had since 2016, but more intensely since last Saturday, because of the news out of Minnesota, the brutality, the defense of it, the reframing of cruelty as order, what it feels like when the rules don't vanish, but fade. Not disappear, not collapse. Just apply less. A few days ago, Sunday the 25th, I posted a video called "The Old Rules Are Washing Away." It was a walk through Tirana, Rome as a mirror, and a question about what happens when systems still exist, but no longer feel binding in the same way. That video turned into a conversation. One comment stopped me. Someone wrote, and I share with gratitude, "Sometimes it feels like the circle of history is inevitable. No matter how aware we are, we'll fall into the same hole. Maybe all we can do is enjoy the ride and brace ourselves." I understand that instinct. It's honest, it's tired, and it's dangerously seductive. Because the moment we decide inevitability absolves us of agency, something else quietly dies. Not the system, the soul. Doesn't everything feel like it's slowly starting to unravel? Not collapsing, unraveling, like chalk on a rainy sidewalk. Still visible, still shaped like rules. But thinner, less binding, washed away a little more each day under your feet as you go about your life. That's the feeling I've been trying to name across my last few videos. The one on rights, the one on contractualism, the one about invisible collapse. This video exists because of this week, because of Minnesota, because of what we saw defended, minimized, and reframed. Because of the PBS NewsHour clip where a U.S. cardinal said something so simple it shouldn't have been controversial. We need to see what's happening in front of us. And yet, in this moment, seeing clearly is treated as provocation. Speaking plainly is framed as extremism. Compassion itself is portrayed as destabilizing. In the video clip of the cardinal, there was some B-roll that played of a bunch of people holding signs. One of the signs captures this message perfectly. When cruelty becomes normal, compassion becomes radical. That's not rhetoric. That's a moral warning light. Because when systems drift toward cruelty, positivity stops being passive. It becomes defiance. Not the loud kind necessarily, not the violent kind, but the refusal to surrender moral agency for comfort. And that's where this walk keeps taking me, not just through Tirana, but through history. Not because history repeats. It doesn't. But because we don't change. Same biology. Same emotions, same fear responses, same temptation to adapt to a worsening normal instead of resist. That's what I meant when I said we're still the same people the Romans were. Not that we're doomed to repeat Rome, but that a clear-eyed person can recognize how humans behave when incentives change and pressure rises. Rome didn't fall because people suddenly became immoral. It transformed because virtue became irrational. The law still existed. The Senate still met. The rituals continued. But power drifted out of shared norms and into personal control. And when rules apply less to the powerful, ordinary people stop acting like citizens. They start acting like survivors. That's the pattern. It's not destiny, it's behavior. And that same question shows up earlier, closer to home, in a place we've flattened into myth. Boston, prior to the American Revolution. Minneapolis is our new Boston. Not the Boston of paintings and slogans, the real one. Cold, occupied, economically strangled, ports closed, assemblies dissolved, troops quartered in homes. Before any revolution, Boston lived through norm erosion. British rule didn't arrive all at once with muskets. It arrived with laws that stopped feeling legitimate, with punishments framed as order, with obedience reframed as maturity. And here's the crucial part. No one knew it would work. There was no guarantee of independence. Most didn't even want independence back then. They were just looking for equality and equanimity from their mother country, England, a redress of grievances. They had assurance of moral vindication, yet they stood up. They had awoken to their own plight and knew the cost to their soul had they not. There comes a time when every person confronts their own demons, when the stakes are so high that they must ascend or wither. This is our moment, just as it was theirs. They had no certainty that speaking up wouldn't destroy their life or livelihoods. Silence was safer. Adaptation to a worsening normal could be explained away or justified as rational, and many chose it. But others didn't. They organized boycotts. They practiced legal civil disobedience. They spoke publicly. They built mass movements. They refused to let injustice become normal, not violently, not recklessly, but deliberately. Boston mattered not because it fired the first shot, but because it proved that legitimacy depends on consent, and consent can be withdrawn before violence. That's the bridge people miss. And it's why this moment matters. Because what we're seeing in America right now isn't a call to arms, it's a test of conscience. What do we owe each other when power becomes unjust? This is where everything I've been working through converges. In my video on contractualism, I talked about what we owe each other, not as abstract philosophy, but as lived obligation. And stripped to its core, it's simple. We owe each other thought, voice, and action when we see injustice. Not perfection. Not purity, not heroism, but refusal. Refusal to pretend we don't see. Refusal to let comfort replace conscience. Refusal to outsource moral responsibility to institutions that are clearly strained. That's the social contract of the commons. It's a personal and collective ethic to protect the shared world, air, water, truth, dignity, and future through daily, intentional choices. The commons isn't ideology. It's the shared world, our institutions, our truth space, other people's dignity, the future itself. And the guiding question is the same one I keep asking in every video. Does this serve the commons? Because when cruelty becomes normalized, serving the commons becomes radical, not because it changed, but because power did. And there's a cost to refusing that responsibility. Not just politically, spiritually. When you forsake agency for comfort, you don't get neutrality. You get erosion. You become someone who explains instead of acts, who rationalizes instead of resists, who adapts to injustice instead of confronting it. Rome had voices like Cicero, and even though they didn't save the Republic, they preserved something else, the moral record. History remembers them not because they won, but because they stood. And that's the through line connecting Rome, Boston, and now. Would the Roman Republic still exist today had they had more Ciceros? Had their people confronted the changing tides as Boston did before the revolution, which we now assume was inevitable? Not inevitability, choice. So when I talk about positivity today, yes, it's hope, but it's also obligation and defiance. The kind that says, I will not normalize cruelty. I will not confuse silence with wisdom. Legal civil disobedience matters. Mass movements matter. Nonviolent resistance matters. Because they are how societies say, this still belongs to all of us. Tomorrow I leave Tirana for Korcha. Quieter streets, different air, more space to think. But I carry this question with me, the same one that keeps resurfacing in all of my work. When the rules start to fade, do we accept the darkness? Or do we become the people who keep the light alive, not with certainty of success, but with clarity of conscience? I think of the person I'll become one day, the man I allow myself to be. For every step draws him ever nearer. He may not approve of every step I take, but at least he'll appreciate me for the journey, that I tried to keep the light alive and honored the sacred soul we share. How can you keep the light alive? You've seen the signal fire in Minneapolis. How will you respond? How will you let your soul soar? People keep walking, and so do I.